Welcome to the Business Transformation Pitch. I am Greg, the CX goalkeeper, bringing you conversations where transformation, leadership, and customer experience meet to create real impact. Did you know 80% of regular listeners haven't subscribed yet? If you enjoy the show, support us by hitting the subscribe button. I promise we will keep raising the bar with the guests, ideas, and strategies that really matter to you. Because in business, just like in football, this conversation could be the game changer. I am Greg's AI-based assistant. Greg had a fascinating conversation with Katie Stabler about the psychology behind customer experience and the culture that makes it work. They discussed about how understanding the psychological elements is crucial for designing effective customer experiences and how organizations can sometimes miss these aspects due to a lack of understanding. Katie shared her insights on the importance of strategy over tactics and how culture plays a pivotal role in successful CX initiatives. Enjoy the episode. Ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Business Transformation Pitch with the CX goalkeeper. I'm Greg, and today I'm with Katie together. Hi, Katie. How are you?
Hello. I'm great, thank you. Great to be here.
Thank you very much. Today we are going to discuss about a really interesting topic. It's not always about AI, and please stay with us, even if in the title of this episode is not AI, but it's about the psychology behind CX and the culture that makes it work. And I think this is the foundation for AI, for everything what we are doing. And I'm super thrilled and keen to have this discussion with you, Katie. But as usual, before we kick off, let's present today's top player. And Katie, could you please share with us the moment in your career where you felt, yes, this really changed the game?
This is such a hard question because I think there's been so many pivotal moments in my career where I think things are moving in the right direction. But most recent, I think publishing my book this year, CX-ISM, last year, where I'm forgetting what year we're in, March last year, that really was a defining moment for me and I hope for customer experience, because writing that book, taking a year to write the book, gave me an opportunity to really define what I think the philosophy of customer experience is and just how important psychology in CX is. And I think that's helped me as a consultant to really also bring this to life in the consultancy engagements that I have.
That's so cool. But now I need to ask the question, where we can find the book?
Amazon and normally local book suppliers. So typically when I travel the world, people say, oh yeah, gosh, it's in this bookshop. I was in South Africa last year and someone told me it was in one of their biggest retailers. And that was really awesome to hear.
That's cool. But now it's also for the audience. Perhaps you can now pause this episode, come back, please, buy the book, and then listen to what we are going to discuss about this fantastic book and what Katie had with us to share. And today, what's the mission that keeps you excited about your work?
It is bringing that philosophy of CX to life in organizations. Through, the nearly 6 years that I've been running my consultancy, but the 15 years that I've been working in CX, I just see the same challenges come up time and time again. And a lot of it is that CX doesn't hit, it doesn't land, it isn't improving return on investment, it isn't making the changes people hope and expect that it will. And I think that deeply lies in it not being started in the right way and not being understood. So I think if we can almost bring it right back down to its foundations and almost start again, I think we'll see a difference in the way that CX actually does prove its value in companies.
I think that's the reality, and I'm really keen to kick off the discussion. Let's start the first half. It's always about background, ideas, and so on, and then we come to the real cases. What you said, it's already relevant because we know that CX is about how people think, feel, behave, and it's also how people are then taking the decisions. Okay, yes, I buy this or I buy that. But we often are really focused on logical stuff. There's one journey, the customer need to follow this journey, and so on. What do leaders often misunderstand about the psychology behind CX?
I don't think it's around a misunderstanding. I think it's just a lack of understanding. I think often CX leaders, if you're lucky enough, first of all, to have a CX leader in a company, well done. That's amazing, because a lot of companies don't. A lot of companies, it's a side desk activity still for somebody else to look after. So if you've got a leader, fantastic. But I think often people who are put into a CX capacity aren't necessarily explicitly trained in CX. You know, they may have worked in customer facing roles and they care deeply about customer centricity and they've got all the skills and ambition and right motivation, but they haven't necessarily gone through formal education or training on what customer experience is. And that means we miss a lot of the psychological elements of customer experience. And actually, just like you said, how feeling, experience, memory, perception, meaning, how much all of this is essential to business development. And I think because we lack that understanding, we don't appreciate how incredibly valuable it is in actually designing and managing customer experiences that work for you as a business. So I think it's less of a misunderstanding, more of a lack of understanding.
Okay. I agree. It's lack of understanding, and basically, at CX expert specialists and so on need to grow in their role. What's your advice to these people? How can they really grow and understand how they should do their work?
Read the book. No, that's not going to be the magic.
That's the prerequisite.
Yeah. No, I think, continue to learn and develop, of course, have that growth mindset. But I think when you are looking at your learning development journey, if you're working in the world of customer experience, do look slightly outside of the box. Don't look at just the traditional framework, which are great and really helpful. But I think absolutely have a look at the psychological side of things. I'm not saying go away and do a psychology degree. Of course you can. But there are lots and lots of different ways of looking at customer experience than just how to build a strategy, how to build a vision. Expand how you grow.
And I can confirm that also from personal experience, because I did a lot of trainings at the beginning of my career. I was in finance, and it was really interesting to understand all these financial models, how they work, how do you calculate all the statistics behind that. But what really changed me, I hope, and I think that it's the reality throughout my career, there are more these soft skills trainings where I started learning about, okay, but you need to listen to the other people on the other side, and let's really deep listen. And it's not, oh yes, I listen, but I already have my answer ready, and so on. And all these social skills, soft skills, psychological skills, also speaking about biases, really helped me throughout my career to better understand other parties, other people, and then to work also in this customer experience field.
Yeah, that's amazing. And that thing about listening, I mean, gosh, it is such a skill. We overlook things like that so simply, but it's hard to really listen properly. Yeah, I think, and on that, it's a slightly different tack to listening, but actually I think one of the greatest ways to learn in CX is to look at what other people are doing and listen to other people. And I think like an amazing but kind of sideline place to get knowledge from are places like awards every year. If you are lucky enough to put yourself forward as a judge and look at what other industries are doing, what other organizations are doing, how they're leading the way, that's an amazing way to learn and build your knowledge around customer experience and what you can do.
And I think this is a big advantage of a community, but also our cultural setup. And we know many organizations are still speaking about CX, even if they think they're doing CX, but very few companies are truly living in. What kind of culture is actually required for CX to work day from day? And we know that it's not the values of the company written on a wallboard or written on the webpage.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not.
And what are your suggestions there?
Oh, for culture.
Yes.
So, there's not a magic bullet. And I think this is a holy grail that we almost all talk about, is that we want to be customer-centric. We're aiming to have this customer-centric culture. And I think it is a fantastic ambition, but it's very, very hard to truly achieve and live by. And I think the only way that you can do that is to make sure that customer is lived and breathed in the organization. And I know that sounds like such a cliche, but it is true. You have to have conversations day in, day out that revolve around the customer. And it can't just be like you said, values written on a wall. They're lovely. And if people can actually remember them and do practice them, then that's a different thing. But I think the real test of the measure comes down to when there's a challenge or a problem, is the right thing being done? And are your people empowered to do the right thing? And I think if the answer to that is yes, then great. That culture, you're clearly very strong in the cultural sense. But if when the chips are down, when there's a problem, when there's a challenge, when it's high stress, if you are pulling back on everything that is written on the wall and you're not doing what you say you're doing, then that's a great measure of the culture not being quite where you need it to be.
I think culture, it's really important. But as you are also experts in psychology, what helps what helps employees adapting in these customer first behaviors that you mentioned?
Being involved and having skin in the game and being part of it. We, as you said, I think right at the beginning of the call, we talk about data, we're data led, we talk about logic, absolutely, and so we should. And when we are talking about customer experience design, very often organizations lean into the data that they have, which is user data, customer facing data, voice of the customer. But we fail to go to one of our easiest sources of insight, which is our people. Other than our customers, the only people who know the customer experience better is our people, particularly our frontline. And I think even just having regular conversations with them, making sure that they'll feel that they're part of that insight route, part of decision making, that's all a really great way to get people thinking customer first and feeling like they're really part of our customer-centric culture. But they have to feel like they're part of it.
And I think that this feeling of being part of something, nowadays we are discussing a lot about artificial intelligence and so on. How can companies integrate artificial intelligence with employees doing their work, listening to them and so on? What's your view on that?
It's a great question, and obviously is one that we have to have top of the agenda, really, because we're not going to get away from the conversations of AI as much as I might like to. But I think ultimately it just comes down to understanding what your problems and challenges or opportunities are, and then working around how do we fix those problems, how do we fix those challenges, or how do we lean into those opportunities, and is part of the answer AI or technology? And if it is, fantastic, great, utilize it. Again, make sure your people are part of those decision makings. And it's sometimes not easy for organizations to embrace change, particularly around new technology, but there are lots of methodologies you can employ to do so. But I think it's just the strategy piece up front. Don't go out and just get AI for the sake of it. Don't think that you're missing out. Don't focus on cost savings or efficiency. What is your problem? What is your challenge? And ask, is technology the answer? If it is, great, go for it. If it isn't, don't. It's simple as that.
Following what you're saying, let's assume that a company does exactly what you're saying. They're trying to solve the problem. They are not trying to solve only the cost issue, but they are really doing that because it helps. Do you have some advices how to integrate that, how to explain that to employees that now AI is taking over, and also touching the topic around the fear of losing their job?
Yeah, that's a really hard one. And I think it does come down to your organization, your culture. I think most importantly, maybe hopefully it's not taking over. There may be some instances, of course, where jobs are lost, and that's a real factor that we have to take into account. But I think the most important thing is just making sure that your employees understand why this decision is being made. So try and be as transparent as you possibly can. Try and be as open as you possibly can. and also look to find the opportunities of where technology is coming in. Well, actually, where do you need your people to support that technology? Because it's in very few cases where it is just going to be technology alone that does the task. So where can your people be deployed, and where can they be part of that decision? Rather than just picking them up and putting them in, actually talk to them, help them solutionize, try and be, as I know I said customer-centric before, but people-centric as possible around this ever-growing use of technology.
I really like that, and also in a project I'm working now, we are defining new roles because we need an AI coaches, AI advisor, AI people that prove that, and then give also the relevant information to these AI tools. And I think that's exactly the main point, that we will try to upskill also the workforce, the frontliners, for older jobs. They are perhaps less repetitive, but they are more interesting because then they can bring really their human skills.
Absolutely. And it sounds like you're making them feel really supported in part of that. If it does require upskilling and new learning and development, it's making people feel like, they're not just being chucked in at the deep end, but actually you're giving them that skills and capability. And, it's always not going to be a happy ending, right? There are going to be people, even where opportunities are found for them, they might not want that. They might have liked their old job. They might want to go somewhere else where they can do that. And, this is the reality of business. That is going to happen. But I think if I had to give one piece of advice through any change initiative, including the adoption of technology, it would be communicate. People get scared when there are silences. People get scared when there are unknown. Yes, there might be challenge with levels of communication, but communicate as much as you possibly can.
That's very important advice. And now let's really go to the second half of this discussion when we share examples. And I know you wrote a book, you have a lot of examples in there. You are often on stage, you are a judge, you have a consulting company. Can you share a real story where an CX initiative was struggling because of the mindset, because of the culture, and what went wrong, and how did you help them then go back to in the right way?
Yeah, I worked with a large organization, and they had the support from a financial perspective, from a resource perspective, to really kind of ramp up their customer experience initiatives. They were already doing a lot, but what they wanted to really do was engage the entire organization. So there was a big training plan that was put together. Initially, it was for 300 frontline staff. Everybody was going to get this foundation level training so that everybody was on the same page. Everybody had that foundation understanding of what customer experience is, what it meant to their role. And as this project went on, those numbers of people trained started to diminish. It got less and less and less. And that frontline engagement training transitioned to online training. And look, it's something that was happening, and it's all positive and all the right steps. But what had happened is this big ambition reduced significantly, which is problematic for a number of reasons. It's problematic because you're not actually going to get the benefit that you initially intended, but also you're showing to your organization this isn't important anymore. This isn't a priority anymore. And culturally, which we keep talking about, that is a huge step back. And I think what the initial root cause of this problem was for this organization is that actually, yes, there are some cultural issues that weren't addressed, but also overarchingly, customer experience wasn't being approached strategically. It was being approached tactically. So there was this goal, very laser focused on this need for training, but actually training is just part of the solution. There was much more that needed to be done behind the scenes. And I think almost all of the organizations that I've ever worked with have fallen into this trap where they're almost laser set on doing this. We'll get a VOC platform, we'll do some training, we'll go out and do this piece of research, when actually they're all just tactics that should be overarched by clear, strong strategy. And unfortunately, we often lack that strategy and just focus on the project. And unfortunately, in this case, I think what it saw, and I mean, I was the lead consultant in this, so I hate to say this, but they definitely didn't get value for money in the sense that they should have, because they're not going to see the long-term benefits simply because it wasn't approached in quite the right way.
But now I think I need to ask the question: how would you have approached this project or this cultural transformation in a strategic way?
So what we have done, what we're continuing to do, is bring that conversation back to strategy. But ultimately, sometimes you can lead a horse to water, as they say. I think what's really important is to get that higher level buy-in. So the people who are making those senior executive decisions, they need to understand actually what are the ramifications of this. And I don't just mean the overall outcomes and benefits of the project, but in its entirety, what's this going to mean? Yes, you might see upskilling of 300 people, for example, but in the long term, what does that mean? When the training has ultimately been forgotten or overtaken by something else, which does happen, where is the long-term lasting benefit? And this is where a training in isolation, a project in isolation isn't the right thing. You've got to have the backup plan. What happens next? What happens next? How are you ingraining the training, the theory into practicality? How are you applying this into everyday behaviors of your people? How is that measured? How is that supported? How is it governed? I think anything that lacks that structure and robust nature isn't going to get you long-term benefits.
That totally makes sense. I would have thousands of additional questions, but taking care of your time, we're coming to an end of this game. But as usual, at the end of the game, we have some penalties, quick fire round. Your role model in business?
Do you know what? I don't have a particular role model, although someone who sits very strong in my heart and mind is an old CX leader of mine who still is strong in the world of CX, Sarah Sargent, who's my very first CX director. But from a leader perspective, anybody that works with integrity and authenticity sits high in my book.
Your transformation superpower?
Transforming theory into practicality.
And high level of energy.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks.
Favorite workplace vibe?
Oh, I really get energy from nice aesthetics. So I like working where there's a nice view out of the window, where it's an aesthetically pleasing office, and with people who also have that energy to support the aesthetics.
And if somebody's watching the video, you have an incredible background. That's really nice.
It gives me energy.
The toughest challenge that you beat in business?
Probably my very first customer experience role. It was very commercially dominated in the world of debt. So customer experience and debt collection doesn't go hand in hand. But it was challenging in all the right ways. And after 2 years in that role, we had some amazing achievements.
So cool. And what's your winning habit?
Winning habit? What do you mean by that? Sorry, winning habits.
What are you doing on a daily basis or regularly that makes you win? Because at the end, you are very successful in all the different things that you're doing.
Perpetual optimism. Never failing, never ending, always optimistic.
Katie, thank you very much for this discussion. Now we are coming really to the last question. Is Katie's golden nugget? It's something that we discussed or something new to leave to the audience with?
Something that we mentioned actually earlier. So customer experience isn't the values that are on the wall. It isn't the things that you say you do. It is how your employees, how your organization acts when the chips are down, when challenges are high, when problems are rife. What are people doing, and are people doing the right thing?
Thank you very much. And I think with this discussion, the audience will profit, because if there are problems, issues, you can reach out to Katie and you can listen to this discussion. And for sure, please buy Katie's book, have a look at it, and provide Katie's or me feedback. Thank you very much. For the audience, for today, it's everything. Katie, please stay with me. Bye-bye. That's all for today. If you enjoyed this episode, please spread the word. It really helps. And remember, 80% of regular listeners haven't subscribed yet. If you enjoyed the show, The easiest way to support us is by hitting that subscribe button. I promise we will keep raising the bar with the guests, ideas, and strategies that matter most to you. Until next time, never forget, we are not in B2B or B2C, we are in H2H, human-to-human environment. Thank you.